Sometimes the worst day of your life becomes the doorway to everything you never knew you wanted. For Ashley Roberts, a 23-year-old waitress drowning in student debt and family obligations, that doorway came disguised as a humiliating termination from the only job keeping her afloat. She thought she was watching her dreams crumble on a rain-soaked sidewalk outside Romano's Italian kitchen. She had no idea she was about to step into a world where billion-dollar fortunes hang in the balance, and where a single conversation in the back of a limousine would change not just her life, but the fate of an entire corporate dynasty. This isn't a fairy tale about a poor girl meeting a rich man. This is the story of how one fired waitress became the key to unraveling a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of American business, and how sometimes the most unlikely people hold the power to expose the truth that others would kill to keep buried. The fluorescent lights of Romano's Italian kitchen cast their familiar harsh glow across the black and white checkered floor as Ashley Roberts tied her apron strings for what she didn't know would be the last time. It was a Tuesday evening in downtown Chicago, the kind of dreary October night when the wind cuts through your jacket and makes you grateful for any warm place that will have you. Ashley had been working the dinner shift for 18 months, long enough to know every crack in the vinyl booths and every temperamental quirk of the ancient espresso machine that wheezed and groaned in the corner. At 5'4", with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, Ashley moved through the restaurant with the efficient grace of someone who had learned to balance 3 plates on one arm while calculating tips in her head. Her smile was genuine, but tired, the kind that comes from working double shifts to pay for night classes at community college while sending money home to help her mother with the mortgage. The American dream, she had learned, was less about soaring and more about surviving. The restaurant was unusually busy for a Tuesday. A convention had let out early from the nearby Marriott, and suddenly every table was filled with middle-aged men in identical navy suits discussing quarterly projections over plates of overpriced pasta. Ashley weaved between tables, refilling water glasses and taking orders with the practiced ease of someone who had memorized the menu long ago. She was clearing table 7 when she first noticed him. He sat alone in the corner booth, a man who seemed to occupy space differently than everyone else in the room. While the convention attendees gestured broadly and talked loudly, this man sat perfectly still, his attention focused entirely on the documents spread across the table before suit him. His was charcoal grey and fit him with the precision that only comes from custom tailoring. His dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, and when he looked up to acknowledge her approach, his eyes were the colour of storm clouds. "Good evening," Ashley said, setting down a glass of water. "Can I start you with something to drink?" "Just coffee," he replied, his voice low and measured. "Black." She nodded and turned to go, but his voice stopped her. "Actually," he said, and there was something in his tone that made her turn back. "Do you have a moment?" Ashley glanced around the restaurant. Her other tables seemed settled for the moment, and there was something in the man's expression that suggested this wasn't a typical customer request. "Of course," she said, though her training told her to keep moving. The man gestured to the documents on his table. Financial reports, legal briefs, pages dense with numbers and corporate terminology. "I've been watching you work tonight," he said, and Ashley felt a flutter of concern. Had she made a mistake? Spilled something? But his expression wasn't angry. It was thoughtful, analytical. You move like someone who understands systems, like someone who pays attention to details. Ashley wasn't sure how to respond. "Thank you, sir. I try to do my job well." "What's your name?" "Ashley Roberts." "Ashley Roberts," he repeated, as if testing how it sounded. "Tell me, Ashley, what do you do when you're not here?" The question caught her off guard. Most customers didn't ask about her life outside the restaurant. "I'm taking classes at Chicago City College," she said. "Business administration." Something shifted in his expression, a spark of interest. "What kind of business interests you?" Ashley hesitated. She had learned to be cautious about sharing too much personal information with strangers, but there was something about this man that suggested he was genuinely listening. "I want to understand how companies work," she said, how they make decisions, how they succeed or fail. I think there's a lot of power in understanding the systems that run our world. The man leaned back in his booth, studying her with new interest. "Smart answer," he said. "Most people think business is just about making money, but you're talking about power structures and decision-making processes. That's a different level of thinking entirely." Before Ashley could respond, a sharp voice cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant. "Roberts, get over here!" Ashley's stomach dropped. Richard Valdez, the restaurant manager, was standing by the host stand with his arms crossed and his face flushed red with anger. His polyester tie was askew, and the thin layer of sweat on his forehead suggested he had been dealing with some crisis while she was talking to the customer in the corner booth. "Excuse me," Ashley said to the man, forcing her professional smile back into place. "I'll be right back with your coffee." But as she walked toward Valdez, she could feel that something was wrong. The other servers were avoiding eye contact, and the hostess was staring down at her reservation book with unusual intensity. Valdez's expression was a mixture of anger and something that looked almost like satisfaction, as if he had been waiting for this moment. "My office," he said, turning on his heel and walking toward the back of the restaurant. Ashley's mind raced as she followed him. Had she done something wrong? Forgotten an order? Made a mistake with a bill? She had been working at Romano's for over a year without any serious problems. Her reviews were good, her tips were decent, and she had never had any complaints from customers. Valdez's office was a cramped space behind the kitchen, cluttered with invoices and schedule sheets, and dominated by a desk that looked like it had been salvaged from a government surplus sale. He closed the door behind them and turned to face her, his expression grim. "Sit down," he said. Ashley remained standing. "What's this about, Mr. Valdez?" He opened a manila folder on his desk and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "A complaint," he said. "Filed this afternoon by Mrs. Patricia Whitmore. She claims you were rude to her during lunch service yesterday. Says you rolled your eyes at her and made her feel unwelcome." Ashley felt her heart sink. She remembered Mrs. Whitmore, a regular customer who came in every Monday for the lunch special and who had a reputation among the staff for being difficult. Yesterday she had sent back her soup twice, claiming it was too cold, then too hot, then complained that the bread was stale even though it had been baked that morning. Ashley had remained professional throughout the interaction, but she could see how her attempt to maintain composure might have been misinterpreted. "I never rolled my eyes at Mrs. Whitmore," Ashley said carefully. "She was having some issues with her order, and I did my best to resolve them." "That's not what she says," Valdez replied, tapping the paper. "And Mrs. Whitmore has been a customer here for 15 years. She's never filed a complaint before." There was something in his tone that made Ashley suspicious. Mrs. Whitmore complained about something every time she came in. The staff joked about it in the break room. For Valdez to claim she had never complained before was either a deliberate lie or willful ignorance. "So I can explain what happened yesterday," Ashley said, "if you'd like to hear my side of the story." "Your side doesn't matter," Valdez said, and now the satisfaction in his expression was unmistakable. "What matters is that we've lost a valued customer because of your attitude. This is a customer service business, Roberts. If you can't handle that, then you don't belong here." The unfairness of it hit her like a physical blow. She had been nothing but professional with Mrs. Whitmore. She had been professional with every difficult customer she had encountered in 18 months of working at Romano's. And now she was being terminated based on a single complaint from a woman who complained about everything. "Mr. Valdez," Ashley said, trying to keep her voice steady, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I've worked here for over a year without any problems. My performance reviews have been positive. If Mrs. Whitmore was unhappy with her service, I'm happy to apologise to her personally and make sure it doesn't happen again." "Too late for that," Valdez said. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out an envelope. "Your final paycheck minus the cost of your uniform. You can clean out your locker and leave your apron with the hostess on your way out." Ashley stared at the envelope, her mind struggling to process what was happening. She was being fired, just like that. No warning, no opportunity to defend herself, no chance to improve. 18 months of reliable service, erased by a single complaint from a customer who had probably been looking for something to complain about. "This isn't fair," she said, and hated how small her voice sounded. "Fair doesn't matter," Valdez replied. "What matters is that we run a respectable establishment here, and we can't afford to have servers who don't understand that the customer is always right. Maybe you'll have better luck at McDonald's." The cruelty of the comment stung more than the termination itself. Ashley had always prided herself on her professionalism, on her ability to handle difficult situations with grace. To be dismissed as someone who belonged at a fast food restaurant felt like a deliberate attempt to humiliate her. She took the envelope from his desk, her hands surprisingly steady. "Fine," she said. "But you're making a mistake. I was a good employee, and you know it. We'll see," Valdez said, already turning his attention to other papers on his desk, as if she had already ceased to exist. Ashley walked back through the restaurant in a daze, acutely aware that every eye was on her. The other servers looked away as she passed, whether from embarrassment or relief that it wasn't them, she couldn't tell. She stopped by her locker in the staff area and gathered her few personal belongings: a sweater, a paperback novel, a small photo of her mother that she kept taped to the inside of the locker door. As she walked toward the front of the restaurant, she remembered the man in the corner booth. She looked over to see him still sitting there, the documents still spread across his table, but now his attention was focused entirely on her. Their eyes met across the dining room, and she saw something in his expression that might have been sympathy, or understanding, or something else entirely. She couldn't bring herself to care. Her world was falling apart, and a stranger's sympathy wouldn't pay her rent, or her tuition, or help her send money home to her mother. She pushed through the front door of Romano's Italian kitchen and stepped out into the cold October night, unemployed and uncertain about what came next. The rain had started while she was inside, a steady drizzle that turned the city lights into blurred halos of colour on the wet pavement. Ashley pulled her jacket closer and started walking toward the bus stop, trying to calculate in her head how long her final paycheck would last and how quickly she could find another job. The math wasn't encouraging. She was halfway to the corner when she heard footsteps behind her, quick and purposeful. She turned to see a man in a black suit jogging toward her, his hand raised as if to get her attention. "Miss Roberts," he called. "Miss Roberts, please wait." Ashley stopped walking and turned around, her heart racing from a mixture of anxiety and confusion. The man approaching her was tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of polished appearance that suggested he worked for someone important. His black suit was immaculate despite the rain, and his shoes gleamed even under the dim streetlights. "Excuse me," she said, taking a step back instinctively. "Do I know you?" The man held up his hands in a gesture that was meant to be reassuring. "My name is Marcus Thompson," he said, slightly out of breath from his jog. "I work for the gentleman you were serving tonight, the one in the corner booth." Ashley glanced back toward the restaurant, but from this distance she couldn't see through the rain-streaked windows. "What does he want?" "He'd like to speak with you," Marcus said. "If you have a moment." "I just got fired," Ashley replied, surprised by the bitterness in her own voice. "I don't think I'm in the mood for conversation." Marcus nodded sympathetically. "I understand, Miss Roberts, but my employer witnessed what happened in there. There, he saw the entire interaction between you and your manager. He believes you were treated unfairly." Ashley felt a surge of validation, followed immediately by suspicion. Why would a complete stranger care about her employment problems? And why would someone who could afford to send a personal assistant chasing after fired waitresses be eating alone at Romano's Italian kitchen? "I appreciate the concern," she said carefully, "but I really need to get home." "Miss Roberts," Marcus said, and there was something urgent in his voice that made her pause. "My employer is prepared to make you an offer. A legitimate offer that could change your circumstances significantly." "What kind of offer?" "The kind that's better discussed somewhere warm and dry," Marcus replied. He gestured toward the street, where Ashley now noticed a black limousine idling at the curb, its engine running and its windows tinted dark enough that she couldn't see inside. Every instinct Ashley had developed growing up in the city told her to walk away. Strange men offering mysterious opportunities from the back of expensive cars. was exactly the kind of situation her mother had warned her about since she was old enough to ride the bus alone. But as she stood there in the rain, unemployed, and facing the prospect of explaining to her mother why the money wouldn't be coming this month, she found herself curious despite her better judgment. 5 minutes, she said. That's all. Marcus smiled and walked toward the limousine, producing an umbrella from somewhere inside his jacket and holding it over Ashley's head as they crossed the street. The rear door of the car opened with a soft mechanical whisper, revealing an interior that looked more like a mobile office than a vehicle. The man from the corner booth sat on one side of the spacious cabin, his documents now organised in neat stacks beside him. The interior was all black leather and polished wood with subtle lighting that created an atmosphere of understated luxury. Ashley had never been inside a limousine before, and she was surprised by how quiet it was despite the traffic outside. "Please, sit," the man said, gesturing to the seat across from him. Ashley noticed that he had removed his suit jacket, revealing a crisp white shirt and silver cufflinks that caught the light when he moved. Ashley settled into the leather seat, acutely aware of her damp uniform and the smell of kitchen grease that probably clung to her clothes. The contrast between her circumstances and the opulence of her surroundings felt almost surreal. "I never got your name," she said. "James Hartford," he replied. "And before you ask, yes, that Hartford, as in Hartford Industries." Ashley felt her stomach drop. Hartford Industries was one of the largest private equity firms in the Midwest, with offices in Chicago, Detroit, and Milwaukee. She had read about them in her business classes, studied their acquisition strategies and corporate restructuring methods. James Hartford wasn't just, wealthy, he was powerful in ways that most people couldn't comprehend. "What does someone like you want with someone like me?" she asked. Hartford leaned back in his seat, studying her with the same analytical expression she had noticed in the restaurant. "That's exactly the right question," he said. "Most people in your position would be asking what I could do for them. You're asking what I want from you. That suggests a level of strategic thinking that's rare." Ashley waited for him to continue, but Hartford seemed content to let the silence stretch between them. Outside the limousine, the city continued its nightly rhythm, but inside the car felt suspended from the normal flow of time. "I watched what happened tonight," Hartford said finally. "You were terminated for something that wasn't your fault. Your manager used a fabricated complaint as an excuse to get rid of you, probably because you're smart enough to see through his incompetence and felt threatened. How could you possibly know that?" "Because I've seen it happen 1,000 times in 1,000 different companies," Hartford replied. "Small-minded people in positions of limited authority who view competence as a threat to their own security. Richard Valdez has been skimming from the restaurant's cash receipts for months. He got rid of you because you're observant enough to notice discrepancies, and he couldn't risk you asking questions." Ashley felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October weather. She had noticed inconsistencies in the nightly cash counts, small shortfalls that Valdez always attributed to calculation errors or forgotten comps. She had assumed he was just bad at math. "How do you know about the missing money?" "Because I own Romano's Italian Kitchen," Hartford said quietly, "along with 43 other restaurants, 12 hotels, 6 manufacturing facilities, and a controlling interest in the company that supplies uniforms to most of the food service establishments in the greater Chicago area." Ashley stared at him, her mind racing to process this information. If Hartford owned the restaurant, then he wasn't just a customer who had witnessed her termination, he was her boss. Or rather, he was her boss's boss's boss. "You could have stopped it," she said. "You were sitting right there. You could have intervened." "I could have," Hartford agreed. "But then I would have learned nothing about how you handle adversity. I would have learned nothing about your character or your decision-making process under pressure, and I wouldn't have been able to make you the offer I'm about to make." Ashley felt a surge of anger that surprised her with its intensity. "You used me," she said. "You let me get humiliated and fired as some kind of test. I gave you an opportunity to reveal who you really are," Hartford corrected. "And what I saw was someone who maintained her dignity in the face of injustice." Someone who refused to grovel or beg or compromise her principles, even when her livelihood was at stake. That's not a quality you can teach, Miss Roberts. That's character. The anger was still there, but it was mixed now with curiosity. What kind of offer? Hartford reached into his briefcase and withdrew a single sheet of paper. The letterhead at the top read, Hartford Industries in elegant script, and below that, Ashley could see the outline of what appeared to be a job description. I have a problem, Hartford said, a significant problem that requires someone with your particular combination of skills and ethical standards. Someone who understands systems and pays attention to details. Someone who can't be bought or intimidated or corrupted. What kind of problem? The kind that could destroy my company if it's not handled correctly, Hartford replied. The kind that involves people in positions of trust who have been betraying that trust for their own benefit. The kind that requires someone on the inside who can observe and analyse and report back without being detected. Ashley looked down at the paper in her hands. The job title read Senior Business Analyst, and the salary figure made her breath catch. It was more than she had ever imagined earning, more than her mother made in 2 years at the textile factory. You're offering me a job as a corporate spy, she said. I'm offering you a position as a business analyst with a focus on internal audit and compliance review, Hartford said smoothly. The fact that this position requires a certain level of discretion is simply a practical necessity. Ashley set the paper down on the seat between them. Why me? You could hire professional investigators, former FBI agents, people with actual experience in this kind of work. Because professionals stand out, Hartford said. They ask questions that make people suspicious. They have tells and habits that experienced criminals learn to recognize. But you, Miss Roberts, you're invisible. You're a working-class college student who needs a job. No one would ever suspect that you're reporting directly to me. The limousine had been circling the same few blocks while they talked, and now Ashley could see Romano's Italian kitchen through the rain-streaked window. The lights were still on, and she could see the silhouettes of the remaining staff cleaning up after the dinner service. Her former life, continuing without her as if she had never existed. What exactly would you want me to do? Hartford leaned forward slightly, his expression becoming more intense. There's a conspiracy within my organisation, he said. Someone has been systematically embezzling funds from multiple properties, manipulating financial reports and covering their tracks with sophisticated accounting tricks. The amounts involved are significant enough to threaten the stability of the entire company. How significant? Conservative estimate. $27 million over the past 3 years. Ashley felt her mouth go dry. $27 million was an almost incomprehensible amount of money. It was enough to buy dozens of restaurants, hundreds of houses, thousands of college educations. And you think this person is someone high up in your organisation? I know it is, Hartford said grimly. The level of access required, the sophistication of the methods being used, the ability to manipulate multiple systems across different properties. This isn't some manager skimming from petty cash. This is someone with executive-level authority who understands our financial systems intimately. Ashley thought about the implications of what he was telling her. If someone in Hartford's inner circle was stealing millions of dollars, then they would presumably be willing to go to great lengths to protect their secret, the kind of lengths that might put anyone investigating them in serious danger. This sounds incredibly risky, she said. It is, Hartford acknowledged, which is why I'm prepared to compensate you accordingly. The salary on that paper is just the beginning. Successful completion of this assignment would come with a bonus of $200,000 and a permanent position within Hartford Industries at whatever level you choose to pursue. Ashley looked down at the job offer again, the numbers seeming to blur together in the dim light of the limousine. It was everything she had ever wanted, the opportunity to escape the cycle of working-class struggle that had defined her family for generations. But it was also terrifying in its scope and implications. I need time to think about this, she said. Of course, Hartford replied, but not too much time. Every day that passes is another day for our thief to cover their tracks more thoroughly, another day for them to realise that their activities might be under scrutiny. How long do I have? 24 hours, Hartford said. Meet me tomorrow night at the Fairmont Hotel. penthouse suite. If you decide to accept, we'll begin immediately. If you decline, you'll never see me again. And this conversation never happened. The limousine pulled to a stop outside Ashley's apartment building, a tired brick structure that looked even more run down in the rain. Marcus had appeared at the door before Ashley realized they had stopped moving, holding an umbrella and waiting to escort her to the building entrance. "Think carefully, Miss Roberts," Hartford said as she prepared to leave the car. "This is the kind of opportunity that comes along once in a lifetime. The kind that can change not just your future, but your family's future for generations to come." Ashley stepped out into the rain, her mind spinning with the weight of the decision before her. As the limousine pulled away from the curb, she stood on the sidewalk watching its tail lights disappear into the Chicago night, wondering if she had just been offered the chance of a lifetime, or if she had somehow stumbled into something far more dangerous than she could possibly understand. The rain drummed against Ashley's apartment window as she sat at her small kitchen table. The job offer spread before her like a map to an unknown country. The numbers seemed to mock her modest surroundings. The second-hand furniture her mother had helped her move in 2 years ago, the textbooks stacked on every available surface, the carefully budgeted groceries arranged in a refrigerator that hummed too loudly and occasionally stopped working altogether. $200,000. The bonus alone was more money than her family had ever seen. Her mother, Eleanor, had worked double shifts at the textile factory for 30 years and never earned in a decade what Hartford was offering for a single assignment. Ashley picked up her phone 3 times to call her mother, and 3 times she set it back down. How could she explain any of this without sounding like she had lost her mind? The rational part of her brain catalogued all the reasons this was a terrible idea. She had no experience in corporate investigation. She didn't understand high-level financial systems. She had never worked in an environment where millions of dollars changed hands as casually as tips at Romano's. The gap between her qualifications and what Hartford was asking seemed insurmountable. But another part of her mind, the part that had always burned with ambition even when ambition seemed pointless, was already calculating possibilities. The salary would let her quit her night job at the campus library. She could take a full course load instead of stretching her degree across 6 years of part-time classes. She could pay off her student loans before they multiplied into an impossible burden. She could send her mother enough money to finally fix the roof that had been leaking for 3 winters. More than that, though, was the challenge itself. Ashley had always been fascinated by puzzles, by the way seemingly random pieces of information could be arranged into patterns that revealed hidden truths. In her business classes, she gravitated toward case studies about corporate fraud and financial investigations. She understood instinctively how money moved through organizations, how it could be hidden and disguised and made to disappear entirely if someone knew the right techniques. The clock on her microwave read 11:47 when she finally made her decision. She opened her laptop and began researching Hartford Industries, diving deep into publicly available financial reports and news articles. What she found both impressed and concerned her. Hartford Industries was even larger than she had realized, with holdings across multiple industries and annual revenues in the hundreds of millions. James Hartford himself was profiled regularly in business magazines as one of the most successful private equity executives in the Midwest. He had built his fortune by identifying underperforming companies, acquiring them at discount prices, and turning them around through strategic restructuring and improved management. But Ashley also found hints of controversy. 3 years ago, a former Hartford Industries executive had filed a whistleblower complaint with the Securities and Exchange Commission, alleging financial irregularities at several Hartford properties. The complaint had been withdrawn 6 months later, and the executive had relocated to Europe shortly afterward. The story had disappeared from the news cycle without resolution. Ashley cross-referenced the timeline with Hartford's description of the embezzlement scheme. If someone had been stealing money for 3 years, and if the whistleblower had exposed financial irregularities 3 years ago, then the 2 events were almost certainly connected. Which meant that whoever was behind the theft had enough power within the organization to silence internal critics and make legal problems disappear. The implications made her stomach tighten with anxiety, but they also sharpened her focus. This wasn't just about money. This was about justice for whoever had tried to expose the truth and been silenced for their efforts. Ashley understood what it felt like to be punished for doing the right thing, to have your voice dismissed by people with more power and influence. She spent the rest of the night researching corporate fraud investigation techniques, reading case studies and academic papers until her eyes burned and her neck ached from hunching over the laptop. By the time dawn light began filtering through her apartment windows, Ashley had filled a notebook with observations and questions and preliminary theories about how someone might systematically steal millions of dollars from a company like Hartford Industries. The next evening, Ashley stood in the marble lobby of the Fairmont Hotel, acutely aware that her best business outfit looked shabby in these surroundings. She had borrowed a blazer from her roommate and spent an hour pressing wrinkles out of her only pair of dress pants, but she still felt like an imposter among the elegantly dressed guests moving through the lobby with casual confidence. The elevator to the penthouse required a special key card, which the desk clerk provided after confirming Ashley's identity against a guest list. As the elevator climbed silently toward the top floor, Ashley tried to calm her racing heart by reviewing the questions she had prepared. She needed to understand exactly what Hartford expected from her, what resources would be available, and most importantly, what safety measures would be in place if the investigation became dangerous. The penthouse suite occupied the entire top floor of the hotel, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Chicago's skyline. Hartford was waiting for her in a sitting area, arranged around a gas fireplace, still wearing a dark suit, but looking more relaxed than he had in the limousine. A silver tea service was arranged on the coffee table, along with a stack of documents bound in leather portfolios. "Miss Roberts," Hartford said, rising to greet her. "I wasn't certain you would come." "I'm here," Ashley replied, accepting his handshake and noting the firmness of his grip. "I have questions." "Of course you do. Please sit. Would you like tea?" "Coffee." "Coffee, thank you." Ashley settled into a leather armchair that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She accepted a porcelain cup from Hartford and took a sip, surprised by the richness of the blend. Hartford returned to his seat and studied her with the same analytical expression she remembered from the restaurant. "Before we begin," he said, "I want you to understand that everything we discuss tonight is confidential. Regardless of whether you accept my offer, you cannot repeat any of this information to anyone." "I understand." "Good." Hartford opened the first portfolio and withdrew a series of financial reports. "Over the past 3 years, we have experienced unexplained discrepancies in revenue reporting across multiple properties. The amounts vary, but they follow a consistent pattern that suggests systematic manipulation rather than random errors or isolated incidents of theft." He spread the reports across the coffee table, and Ashley leaned forward to examine them. Each page showed detailed financial data for different Hartford properties, restaurants, hotels, and manufacturing facilities across 3 states. Even with her limited experience, Ashley could see the anomalies Hartford was describing: revenue figures that didn't align with reported customer traffic, expense categories that seemed inflated compared to industry standards, profit margins that fluctuated wildly from month to month without apparent cause. The sophistication required to manipulate this many different systems suggests someone with administrative access to our central financial database, Hartford continued. Someone who understands our reporting procedures well enough to hide their activities within normal business operations. Ashley studied the patterns more closely, her mind automatically organizing the information into categories and connections. The thefts weren't random. They followed seasonal patterns, clustering around times when cash flow would naturally be higher and irregularities would be harder to detect. Whoever was behind this understood not just Hartford Industries' financial systems, but the broader rhythms of the hospitality and manufacturing industries. "Have you brought in outside auditors?" Ashley asked. "We conduct regular audits," Hartford replied, "but auditors examine documentation, not underlying systems. If someone has been manipulating the source data before it reaches the auditors, the reports would appear clean even if the underlying theft continues." "What about law enforcement?" Hartford's expression darkened. "The FBI requires evidence of specific crimes before they will open an investigation. Right now, all we have are suspicious patterns and unexplained discrepancies. Without proof of actual theft, without identifying specific individuals and specific criminal acts, law enforcement cannot help us. Ashley nodded, understanding the bind Hartford found himself in. He knew money was being stolen, but he couldn't prove it without access to information that only the thief possessed. It was a classic investigative paradox. You needed evidence to get permission to look for evidence. So you need someone on the inside, Ashley said. Someone who can access systems and observe behavior without triggering suspicion. Exactly. Hartford opened another portfolio, revealing what appeared to be organizational charts and employee profiles. The theft requires coordination between multiple departments: financial reporting, inventory management, payroll processing, vendor relations. We're not looking for a single individual acting alone. We're looking for a conspiracy. Ashley felt a chill as the full scope of what Hartford was describing became clear. This wasn't just embezzlement. This was a coordinated criminal enterprise operating within his organization, involving multiple people in positions of trust. The kind of conspiracy that would have contingency plans and security measures and ways of eliminating threats to their operation. "How dangerous do you think this could become?" she asked. Hartford was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city lights beyond the windows. 3 years ago, he said finally, a senior financial analyst named David Kowalski raised concerns about irregularities he had noticed in our quarterly reports. He filed an internal complaint and requested permission to conduct a deeper investigation. What happened to him? He withdrew his complaint 6 months later and accepted a generous severance package. He moved to London and now works for a financial consulting firm. When I contacted him last month to ask about his original concerns, he declined to discuss the matter and suggested I not contact him again. Ashley absorbed this information, understanding the implications. Kowalski had found something significant enough to frighten him into silence and exile, which meant that whoever was behind the theft had enough power and resources to neutralize threats to their operation. "You think they threatened him?" Ashley said. "I think they made him an offer he couldn't refuse," Hartford replied. "The same kind of offer they would make to anyone else who got too close to the truth, including me." Hartford met her gaze directly. "Including you, which is why I need someone they won't see coming. Someone who appears to be exactly what they are. A young professional trying to build a career. Someone whose background and circumstances make them seem harmless." Ashley set down her coffee cup and leaned back in her chair, weighing everything she had learned. The assignment was more dangerous than Hartford had initially suggested, but it was also more important. If a criminal conspiracy was operating within Hartford Industries, then they weren't just stealing money. They were undermining the livelihoods of thousands of employees whose jobs depended on the company's financial stability. "What would my specific role be?" she asked. Hartford opened a final portfolio, revealing what appeared to be a detailed job description and organizational chart. "You would be hired as a senior business analyst in our corporate headquarters, reporting directly to the chief financial officer. Your official responsibilities would involve reviewing operational efficiency across our various properties and identifying opportunities for cost reduction and revenue enhancement. And my unofficial responsibilities? You would have access to financial systems across all Hartford properties. You would be expected to travel frequently, visiting different locations and conducting on-site reviews. This would give you opportunities to observe operations firsthand and identify discrepancies that might not be visible in the documentation." Ashley studied the organizational chart, noting the names and positions of the people she would be working with. The chief financial officer was a woman named Catherine Reeves, who had been with the company for 12 years and held an MBA from Northwestern University. Below her were department heads for accounting, payroll, inventory management, and vendor relations. Any of them could potentially be involved in the conspiracy Hartford was describing. "How long do you think this investigation would take?" Hartford shrugged. "That depends on how carefully our thieves have covered their tracks and how quickly you can identify the key players. Weeks, certainly. Possibly months. The important thing is that we proceed methodically and document everything thoroughly. When we finally move against them, we need evidence that will stand up in criminal court." Ashley nodded, understanding that this wasn't just about recovering stolen money. This was about building a case that would result in prosecutions and prison sentences. The stakes were higher than she had initially realized, but so was the potential impact of success. "I'll need guarantees," she said, "about my safety and my legal protection." "Of course." Hartford reached into his briefcase and withdrew another document. "This is a comprehensive agreement outlining your employment terms, compensation structure, and the security measures we'll put in place to protect your identity and your safety." Ashley scanned the agreement quickly, noting clauses about legal representation, personal security, and relocation assistance if the investigation became compromised. Hartford had clearly thought through the risks involved and was prepared to invest significant resources in protecting her. "There's something else," Hartford said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "Once you begin this investigation, there's no backing out. The people we're hunting will eventually realize that someone is looking for them. When that happens, anyone connected to the investigation becomes a potential target." Ashley felt her heart rate increase as the full weight of the decision settled on her shoulders. She was being asked to put her life at risk to expose criminals who had already demonstrated their willingness to silence threats. The rational part of her brain was screaming warnings, telling her to walk away while she still could. But another part of her, the part that had always refused to accept injustice, was already committed to the fight. She thought about David Kowalski, forced into exile for trying to do the right thing. She thought about her own termination from Roman News, punished for having integrity in a system that rewarded corruption. She thought about her mother, working double shifts for wages that barely covered basic expenses while wealthy criminals stole millions without consequence. "I'll do it," Ashley said, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. Hartford smiled for the first time since she had met him, an expression of genuine relief and satisfaction. "Welcome to Hartford Industries, Miss Roberts. I have a feeling you're going to change everything." As Ashley signed the employment agreement, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was crossing a threshold from which there would be no return. The life she had known, the modest dreams she had carefully constructed, were about to be replaced by something far more dangerous and infinitely more consequential. She was no longer Ashley Roberts, the fired waitress struggling to pay college. She was now Ashley Roberts, corporate investigator, hunting criminals who had stolen millions and would presumably kill to protect their secret. The transformation felt both terrifying and exhilarating, like stepping off a cliff and discovering she could fly. The transformation began immediately. Within 48 hours of signing Hartford's agreement, Ashley found herself standing in the marble lobby of the Hartford Industries corporate headquarters, wearing a charcoal grey suit that had been delivered to her apartment that morning, along with a complete professional wardrobe and a briefcase containing her new credentials. The building rose 32 floors above downtown Chicago's financial district, its glass facade reflecting the morning sun like a monument to corporate power. Her reflection in the elevator's polished steel doors showed someone she barely recognized. The borrowed blazer and pressed pants had been replaced by clothing that fit perfectly, tailored to project exactly the right combination of competence and ambition. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon that suggested authority without appearing threatening. She looked like someone who belonged in these halls of power, someone whose presence would never be questioned. The 28th floor housed the executive offices of Hartford Industries' financial division, a sprawling maze of glass-walled conference rooms and ergonomic workstations that hummed with the quiet efficiency of serious money being managed. Ashley's new office was positioned strategically between the accounting financial officer's suite department and the chief, giving her natural reasons to interact with both areas while maintaining the appearance of legitimate business operations. Catherine Reeves, the chief financial officer, was waiting in Ashley's office when she arrived. A woman in her early 50s with silver-streaked auburn hair and the kind of understated jewellery that whispered rather than shouted about wealth, she moved with the confident precision of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected thousands of lives and millions of dollars. "Ashley Roberts, I presume," Catherine said, extending a firm handshake. "Welcome to Hartford Industries. I've heard impressive things about your analytical capabilities." "Thank you, Miss Reeves. I'm excited to contribute to the organisation's success." Catherine settled into one of the leather chairs facing Ashley's desk, crossing her legs with practised elegance. Your background is interesting, she continued, consulting a tablet that contained Ashley's carefully constructed professional history. Business administration at Chicago City College, followed by specialized training in operational efficiency analysis. Not the typical pedigree we see at this level, but sometimes fresh perspectives are exactly what we need. Ashley felt a flutter of anxiety as she realized Catherine was probing, testing whether her cover story would hold under scrutiny. The background Hartford's team had created was plausible but deliberately thin, designed to explain her rapid promotion without providing too much detail that could be verified or contradicted. I believe in earning opportunities through results rather than credentials, Ashley replied, channeling the confidence she had observed in successful business people during her research. I'm more interested in solving problems than discussing my resume. Catherine smiled, an expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. Excellent attitude. Your first assignment will be reviewing operational efficiency across our restaurant properties. We've been experiencing some concerning variations in profit margins, and Mr. Hartford wants a comprehensive analysis of potential causes and solutions. Ashley accepted the tablet Catherine handed her, noting that it contained detailed financial data for 12 Hartford-owned restaurants across Illinois, Wisconsin, and Indiana. The information looked legitimate, but she recognized it as a test. Catherine was watching to see how Ashley would approach the analysis, what questions she would ask, and whether she would notice the same patterns that had originally alerted Hartford to the conspiracy. I'll need access to the central financial database to cross-reference this information with historical performance data, Ashley said, establishing her need for the system access that would be crucial to her real mission. Of course, Catherine tapped her tablet and Ashley felt her own device vibrate with an incoming message. Your login credentials and security clearance have been activated. You'll have access to all financial reporting systems across our organization, with the exception of certain executive-level functions that require additional authorization. Ashley nodded, understanding that Catherine had just given her the keys to Hartford Industries' financial kingdom while carefully noting which doors remained locked. The executive-level functions Catherine mentioned would likely be where the most sophisticated theft activities were hidden, but Ashley now had a legitimate reason to request expanded access as her investigation progressed. How quickly do you need the restaurant analysis completed? Ashley asked. 2 weeks for a preliminary report, Catherine replied, rising from her chair with fluid grace. 1 month for comprehensive recommendations. I should mention that this analysis will require site visits to each property. You'll be traveling extensively over the next few weeks. Ashley's story reminds us that sometimes our biggest setbacks become our greatest opportunities. A single moment of injustice transformed a struggling waitress into the key to exposing a multi-million-dollar conspiracy. Her courage to step into that mysterious limousine didn't just change her own destiny. It revealed that the most unlikely heroes often hold the power to bring down those who believe they're untouchable. When life closes one door, keep your eyes open for the limousine waiting in the rain.